7 signs your spiritual awakening is over. It's time to use your powers. Enlightenment is not imagining figures of light, but making the darkness conscious. Carl Jung. There comes a time in every spiritual journey when awakening is no longer the goal embodiment. If you've been on the path of spiritual growth, seeking signs, synchronicities, and soul truths, this video might be the turning point you didn't know you needed. Because what if your awakening isn't beginning, but completing? What if the signs, the solitude, and the shedding were all leading to this moment where you step into your true power, unapologetically? On Spiritual Wisdom, we're exploring 7 revealing signs that your awakening phase is over and your embodiment era has begun. Which one speaks to your soul the most? Let us know in the comments and share this with someone who's ready to rise beyond awakening. Sign 1. Your intuition guides you without doubt. You no longer need to ask for a sign. You no longer need to overthink your feelings or seek confirmation from 10 different people. Your intuition has become the loudest voice in the room, and for the first time in your life, you trust it without hesitation. You don't question where it comes from or what it means. It speaks, and you follow. This is no longer a guess. It's guidance. This isn't hope. It's clarity. You feel the decision before you can explain it, and you know it's right without needing to justify it. This is spiritual wisdom, taking the wheel subtle, precise, and powerful. There was a time when you needed validation. You wanted someone to tell you you were on the right path, to give you permission to feel what you were already feeling deep inside. But now, you don't need to ask. You just know. You've stopped asking the universe to speak louder, because now you've quieted the noise within. You've made enough mistakes, followed enough wrong turns, and sat in enough silence to know what your soul sounds like, and now you listen. You no longer chase signs because you are the sign. You've become the confirmation you once sought outside of yourself. That's when the shift becomes clear. Your awakening is no longer something you're working through. It's who you are now. And when decisions come, you don't hesitate. You don't consult 5 opinions. You don't wait for everything to be perfect or fully understood. You act not impulsively, but intuitively. You feel the pull, and you follow it. You walk through doors others are still analyzing. And this isn't recklessness, it's alignment. You don't need logic to back it up anymore. You move with the rhythm of your spirit. And in that rhythm, there's no fear. There's only knowing. Before, you were always learning, watching, searching. You needed spiritual books, podcasts, courses, because you were still remembering who you are. But now, you live what you used to study. You walk as what you once admired. You speak from a place of experience, not theory. And that's what spiritual wisdom is, not information, but embodiment. You've stopped talking about the path. Now you are the path. Your intuition isn't just a feeling anymore, it's a system, a guidance structure that your life runs on. You make decisions without panic. You feel peace in your boundaries. You no longer explain your energy to people who don't understand it. Your life has become a reflection of your inner knowing, and that knowing is crystal clear. You've stopped performing for the world because you've already been approved by something higher. You no longer wait for the green light. You are the green light. Even your timing has changed. You no longer force things to happen. You trust when things pause. When doors close, when silence stretches longer than expected, you recognize the divine rhythm at work. And you don't need to rush it, because you're in sync with something deeper. The void no longer scares you, it steadies you. The uncertainty no longer shakes you, it sharpens you. You're not just spiritually curious anymore, you're spiritually calibrated. Now, your yes is rooted in alignment. Your no comes from clarity, not guilt. You don't need long explanations or drawn-out apologies. You're not here to convince anyone, you're here to follow the truth. And that truth speaks through your intuition, clear and constant, like a compass that never wavers. Every moment, every choice, every shift in direction, it's all coming from within. There's no fear in that, only power. And this power doesn't shout, it doesn't need to. It simply is. You carry it in how you move, how you speak, how you choose. This is the sign that your spiritual awakening is over. When you no longer search for alignment, you are alignment. Your intuition has become your lifestyle. Your choices are made in wholeness, not in doubt. And your life, slowly and steadily, becomes a mirror of your soul's deepest truth. That is the gift of spiritual wisdom, and now it lives in you. If you're ready to trust your inner guidance and follow your intuition with clarity and confidence, comment below, "I follow my inner voice." Let this be your declaration that you no longer seek outside approval. Your soul already knows the way. Sign 2. Material desires no longer control you. You no longer crave the shiny symbols of success that once held power over you. The chase for wealth, the desire to accumulate more, the longing for titles, praise, and possessions they've lost their grip. What once felt urgent now feels empty. You've looked behind the curtain of materialism and seen that it was never the destination. It was a distraction. What you want now cannot be held in your hands, but must be felt in your soul. Peace, purpose, and deep inner alignment. This is not detachment out of defeat. This is the kind of clarity that only arrives after the storm of longing has passed. You no longer measure your value by your bank account, your home, or your appearance. Instead, you measure it by how quiet your mind is when you're alone, how full your heart is when you give, and how aligned you feel when you speak your truth. Your old self used to hustle for validation, but your awakened self moves with quiet confidence. Your needs are no longer fueled by scarcity, but by sacredness. You no longer grasp, you allow. You no longer chase, you attract. And the shift is so powerful, it's almost invisible, yet your entire life feels lighter because of it. Abundance still flows to you, but the desperation is gone. There's no more begging, forcing, or proving. Now, abundance comes to you like a trusted friend, gently, consistently, and without resistance. You've realized that spiritual awakening doesn't mean rejecting money or success. It means refusing to let them define you. You no longer build your self-worth on things that can be taken away. You've rooted your worth in something eternal, your divine essence, your mission, your presence. You're no longer interested in proving anything to anyone. What once felt like ambition now feels like noise. Your soul has taken the lead. Your desires have been refined. You only move if it's in alignment. You only say yes if your spirit agrees. And that alignment has made you magnetic, not just to people, but to opportunities, blessings, synchronicities. What once required exhausting effort now flows with grace. Because your energy is clean, your intentions are clear, your heart is open, and your hands are steady. As Carl Jung said, who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. You've done the inner work. You've healed the need to be seen and replaced it with the power to see clearly. You've traded applause for peace, comparison for compassion, and approval for authenticity. Your life is no longer about getting more, but about becoming more. And that shift? That's not just growth. That's power. If this message resonates with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep evolving together. Sign number 4 is waiting for you. Sign 3. You no longer feel separate from the universe. You no longer feel like an outsider, disconnected from the flow of life, or cut off from something greater. That feeling of separation, once so heavy and defining, has quietly melted away. You're not fighting the world anymore. You're part of it. You've stopped resisting change, because deep down, you now trust that everything unfolds exactly as it should. This isn't just acceptance, it's alignment. It's what Carl Jung called individuation, the realization that what you were searching for was never outside of you. It was always within, waiting to be remembered. The illusion of separation between you and nature, between you and others, between you and the divine has dissolved. You sense the unity behind all things. A tree is no longer just a tree. A stranger's eyes are no longer empty. A difficult moment is no longer meaningless. Everything is speaking, and now you have the ears to hear it. There's a calmness in you that wasn't there before. You don't need to control the outcome because you feel guided by something deeper than logic, by rhythm, by intuition, by a sacred intelligence moving through all things, including you. Carl Jung believed that wholeness arises when we integrate all the hidden parts of ourselves, not when we deny or escape them. That process has happened to you. You've sat with your pain. You've faced your confusion. You've embraced your light and your shadow. And something incredible has happened in return. You've come home to yourself. That home isn't a place, it's a way of being, a way of seeing. It's the moment you realize that the universe isn't out there, it's here, and it's always been. In everyday life, this shows up in small but powerful ways. You stop rushing, you start listening, you become more present with people, even when they're hurting or triggering. You don't take things so personally anymore, because you see the bigger picture. Even in chaos, you hold your center. Even in silence, you feel full. Your identity is no longer built on roles, labels, or outcomes. It's rooted in presence. You've stopped trying to become someone, and you've started being yourself, fully and unapologetically. This shift is not just a spiritual idea, it's a lived transformation. A woman once shared that after years of trying to fix her life, something changed. She stopped forcing answers and started paying attention to the stillness. One afternoon, sitting alone, she felt everything around her, trees, wind, and light suddenly come alive. Not through words, but through being. She realized she wasn't alone, never had been. That moment wasn't dramatic, but it changed everything. That's what it's like when the separation fades. You stop asking for signs and start living as the sign. You've reached the point where your awakening is no longer about seeking. It's about embodying. You carry the spiritual wisdom of someone who has returned from the depths, not with noise, but with knowing. You've stopped needing to be chosen because you know you were. And now, it's time to use what you've become. Are you starting to feel deeply connected to the universe and all that is? If this resonates with you, comment below. I am one with the universe. To affirm your spiritual awakening and inspire others to embrace their divine connection too. Let's grow together. Sign 4. You have embraced solitude and peace. You no longer fear being alone because you've come to realize that solitude is not a punishment. It's a gift. The moment you stopped chasing noise and started cherishing silence was the moment your awakening matured. You began to understand what Carl Jung meant when he said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that matter." Now, your soul no longer aches for constant company. It craves peace, stillness, and presence. You have stopped filling the silence with distractions and started letting it speak to you. Spiritual awakening isn't just about realizing universal truths. It's about learning to enjoy your own company in a world that tries to make you forget who you are without others. You no longer measure your worth by how many people call, text, or notice you. You've stopped performing for attention and started protecting your energy like it's sacred. You've learned that not everyone deserves access to you, and that peace is not found in a crowd. It's found in alignment with your higher self. That's why shallow relationships no longer satisfy you. They feel too small, too loud, too disconnected from the depth your soul has awakened to. You begin to crave conversations that stretch your mind, not just pass the time. You're no longer afraid to walk away from people who can't meet you there. This isn't arrogance, it's evolution. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing yourself so deeply that you no longer negotiate your peace for temporary company. The void that once made you feel lonely now feels full because you filled it with self-respect, awareness, and truth. You've discovered the paradox that in silence, you are not alone. You are most connected. You start to notice how the world praises extroversion, but forgets that all transformation happens in the quiet. You don't need constant validation or stimulation anymore. You choose nights with yourself over draining events. You journal instead of overshare. You take walks to reconnect with your center rather than scroll endlessly for meaning. You find that when your energy is aligned, solitude becomes your sanctuary. It's not isolation, it's inner integration. Carl Jung believed that the process of individuation, of becoming whole, required retreating from the collective, confronting your own shadow, and learning to live from the center of your being. And that is exactly what you're doing. You are not waiting for someone else to complete you. You're not chasing after shallow conversations just to feel seen. You have become the one who sees yourself fully, and that's power. You no longer feel guilty for choosing peace. You protect your space, your time, and your heart because you understand that not everyone is meant to walk with you in this chapter. This isn't about being alone. It's about being in alignment. It's not about isolation. It's about insulation from noise that distorts your truth. Silence no longer signals emptiness. It signals readiness, depth, power. This is where the real transformation happens, not in the chaos, but in the calm. And now, you finally understand that. Do you feel this deep shift within you? If you've embraced solitude and found peace in your own presence, declare it boldly in the comments. I protect my peace and walk in divine stillness. Sign 5. You can see through deception and illusions. You no longer fall for the lies. That's the sign. The veil has lifted, and you see through the manipulation that once controlled you. The fear-based headlines, the glamorized delusions, the hollow promises of happiness sold by society no longer seduce you. You've awakened, and with that awakening comes a piercing clarity. It's not just that you recognize deception. You feel it, sense it, and walk away from it with grace. Your spiritual awakening has trained your perception. Now, you see the intention behind the words, the energy behind the actions, and the illusion behind the mask. You no longer believe something simply because it's on the news or because someone in power says it. Your discernment is alive, sharp, grounded, and uncompromising. You understand how deeply conditioned people are to accept fear as truth and control as safety. But you've stepped outside of that. You've stopped outsourcing your thinking. You question the narrative, not out of rebellion, but because your soul refuses to live in illusion. And that discernment, that quiet, grounded knowing, has made you immune to fear. You used to get caught in the emotional chaos of others. Now, you observe it without absorbing it. You used to believe the world's definition of success, safety, and love. You define those things for yourself. You can feel when something is off, even if everyone else is clapping for it. You can see through the polished appearance and straight into the energy. You've stopped being impressed by the surface and started being guided by substance. And when people try to manipulate you, you feel it in your gut. You don't need evidence. Your body tells you. Your soul speaks louder than their performance. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." And that's exactly what happened. You went inward, and the world became visible. You're no longer a puppet of culture, media, or fear. You walk in truth, and that truth keeps you steady in a world of shifting illusions. This clarity can feel isolating at times. You see things others don't. You sense energies they ignore. But this is not a burden. It's your power. You're not meant to convince others. You're meant to embody the truth so deeply that your presence itself becomes a disruption to deception. When others are triggered by your calm or your silence, it's because you remind them of a truth they've forgotten. You're not here to argue, to prove, or to explain. You're here to live aligned. That's what makes you untouchable. That's what keeps you free. You don't need to escape the world. You just no longer belong to the illusion of it. And when the world tries to pull you back into its fog, you return to your center. You return to your clarity. You return to your soul. Because once your spiritual awakening strips away illusion, there's no going back. And you wouldn't want to. If this message resonates with your spirit, subscribe and stay connected to a community that seeks truth beyond illusion. Here, we awaken, discern, and rise together in clarity. Remember, you are grounded in divine truth. No fear, no deception can shake you now. Sign 6. You naturally attract people who need your light. You no longer need to announce your presence or explain your journey. People feel it. They are drawn to you, not because of your words, but because of your steady, grounded, and healing energy. Even without trying, you've become a lighthouse in the storm for those still lost in confusion. Strangers start conversations. Friends open up. Someone glances at you and senses peace. This is not an accident. This is what happens when your spiritual awakening has moved from a personal transformation to a collective impact. Your light is no longer for you alone. It's for others who are ready to rise. Carl Jung taught that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Now that you've done the inner work facing the shadows, healing the wounds, dissolving illusions, you've shifted your frequency. People can feel that. Without knowing why, they sense that you're safe. They see something in your presence that reminds them of who they could be. And in a world where most are still asleep, your awakened state becomes a magnet for those hungry for clarity, guidance, and truth. You don't need to offer advice. Sometimes, your stillness is enough. But just as light attracts, it also reveals. And not everyone is ready for what your energy exposes. You may notice that some people suddenly distance themselves. They might become defensive, critical, even hostile. This is not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of their own unhealed parts. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious aspects of ourselves we deny or suppress. When your light meets someone else's shadow, it either inspires or threatens. And that reaction has nothing to do with your worth. This is where spiritual wisdom becomes essential. Discernment is no longer optional. It's a requirement. You must learn to tell the difference between those who are genuinely seeking light and those who simply want to feed off it. Being open-hearted does not mean being available to everyone. Your energy is sacred. Protect it. Just because someone is drawn to you doesn't mean they're ready to grow with you. Give your presence, but not your peace. Hold space, but don't lose yourself in it. A young woman once shared how she used to wonder why people always poured their souls out to her, even strangers on the train. She wasn't a healer by profession, but her spirit had matured through years of quiet endurance. One day, someone told her, "I don't know why, but I feel lighter just talking to you." That's when she realized she had become medicine just by being real. Not perfect, not loud, just a present. That's what spiritual awakening does. It turns pain into power, silence into depth, and survival into healing for others. You didn't choose this role by ego. It was chosen through your journey. You don't have to force your light. It flows naturally because you've embodied it. And now, that light is guiding others home, not through preaching, but through being. If this message speaks to your soul, say it out loud. I am a vessel of light, and those who need healing are drawn to me. I honor this calling with wisdom and grace. Sign 7. You feel a strong call to step into your mission. You no longer feel satisfied with what once excited you. The noise, the distractions, the things that used to fill your time now feel empty, like echoes from a version of yourself that no longer exists. This isn't apathy. This is clarity. A sacred clarity that arises after a long season of inner work, solitude, and shedding illusions. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." And you, after all the seeking, have awakened. But now, something deeper is stirring. It's not a whisper anymore. It's fierce, urgent, undeniable. You feel it in your bones, in your breath, in your spirit. You are being called. The call isn't vague. You are being pulled to teach, to heal, to lead, to build. Not because it's glamorous or profitable, but because it feels unbearable to do anything else. You are no longer able to numb this knowing. There's a shift from waiting for the sign to realizing you are the sign. Everything you've lived through, the grief, the chaos, the nights you thought you wouldn't survive, wasn't wasted. It was preparation. You didn't lose time. You were being forged. And now, that forging is complete. Now, you carry wisdom in your wounds and power in your presence. The old identity is collapsing because the new one is ready to rise. The world will still tempt you with comfort and conformity, but you've outgrown it. You've tasted something real, and nothing else will do. Carl Jung taught that healing doesn't mean becoming perfect, but becoming whole. You now understand your shadows, your patterns, your light. You are no longer fragmented. You are integrated. And that integration demands expression. This isn't the time to shrink. It's the time to step forward, not with certainty, but with conviction. Think of the countless souls out there praying for a guide, a word, a sign of hope. What if that sign is you? What if your story, your voice, your truth is exactly what someone else needs to remember who they are? What if your pain, now alchemized into wisdom, is the bridge to someone else's freedom? The calling you feel isn't ego. It's a service. It's a sacred responsibility. And no, you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to begin. Everything in your life has led to this moment. You've been initiated by experience, not theory. The universe doesn't wait for perfect people. It moves through willing vessels. Your spiritual awakening was never meant to be a destination. It was a doorway. And now that you've walked through it, the mission begins. Not someday. Not when you're more ready. Now. If this message has stirred something deep within you, declare it boldly in the comments. I accept my divine mission. I am ready to serve with purpose and power. Your calling is no accident. It's time to rise. Subscribe and join others who are awakening to their true path. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey. If something within you stirred while watching this video, trust that it wasn't random. Your awakening wasn't the end. It was the beginning of your true embodiment. Now is the time to live your wisdom, walk in your power, and become the mirror of the transformation you've already undergone. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Tap the notification bell so you never miss an upload that speaks directly to your soul. Until next time, stay aware, stay empowered, and keep using your light. The 3 moments that almost destroy every empath, and how Carl Jung says you survive them. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Carl Jung. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom. Today, we're diving into the 3 moments that almost break every empath. The moments that shake your identity, test your boundaries, and push your heart to the edge. But more importantly, we'll explore how Carl Jung's teachings reveal the exact inner strengths that help you survive, rise, and transform through them. As you listen, reflect on your own journey. Which of these moments have you faced, and what did they teach you about yourself? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be the light someone else needs today. The first deadly moment, the recognition of non-reciprocity. The first deadly moment in an empath's life is the recognition of non-reciprocity. That piercing instant when you finally see with painful clarity that the warmth, gentleness, and emotional depth you offer so naturally are not being returned in the same way. And this realization almost destroys you because it collapses the quiet illusion that others feel relationships as deeply as you do, exposes how many of your bonds have been quietly one-sided, and forces you into a kind of inner exile that feels like psychological aloneness. It is in this raw place that so many empaths begin blaming themselves, wondering if they were too intense, too sensitive, too available, or too loving, while others swing toward cynicism, convincing themselves that real closeness does not exist. But beneath all of this emotional turbulence lies a spiritual truth that Carl Jung insisted on confronting. You are not actually seeing the person, you are seeing the projection of your own empathy reflected back at you. And it is this projection that creates the illusion of reciprocity. When the projection breaks, the truth appears, and it is this unveiling that feels like heartbreak. Yet Jung's survival protocol, conscious discrimination, exists precisely for this moment. It is a discipline of clarity, a willingness to observe people as they are, rather than as your heart hopes they might become. And this clarity becomes the foundation of your spiritual awakening, because it teaches you that empathy is not a universal language. It is a rare dialect, spoken fluently only by a few. Conscious discrimination asks you to stop pouring your emotional energy into relationships that do not, cannot, or will not reciprocate, because continuing to give deeply in desert soil will only lead you to spiritual exhaustion. This is why Jung's wisdom echoes through the metaphor, "Don't plant orchids in desert soil." A reminder that even the most precious seeds cannot bloom where the environment itself rejects nourishment. To practice this, you must begin noticing subtler forms of reciprocity, the way someone listens when you speak, whether they initiate connection or only respond when needed, whether they show care without being prompted, whether they repair after conflict or simply wait for you to fix everything. These tiny behavioral patterns hold spiritual wisdom because they reveal the architecture of a person's emotional world. When you stop projecting your empathy onto others, these patterns become easier to see, and with each act of seeing, you reclaim a piece of the power you once surrendered to imbalance. This moment of recognition is devastating, not because others are unkind, but because you finally witness the truth without the cushioning of illusion. It forces you to realize that your emotional generosity cannot transform someone who is unwilling to meet you at your depth. But rather than hardening your heart, conscious discrimination refines it. It teaches you that spirituality is not passive softness. It is disciplined awareness, a grounded understanding of where your energy flows and where it drains. It shows you that spiritual awakening is not only about transcendent experiences. Sometimes it is about identifying the subtle dynamics that quietly shape your emotional life and learning how to navigate them with maturity and grace. As you move through this recognition, the grief that rises is not a sign of personal failure. It is the release of an outdated narrative that once governed your relationships. The sadness belongs not to the truth itself, but to the years you spent believing that your empathy alone could sustain connection. In this grief, you begin to realign your boundaries. You learn to draw a sacred circle around your emotional energy and to protect it not with walls, but with discernment. You begin to understand that the right relationships will not need to be rescued, revived, or restructured. They will breathe on their own. When this clarity takes root, your internal world begins to shift. You stop being magnetized toward emotional desserts and start gravitating toward environments where mutuality exists naturally. You recognize that intimacy is not created through effort alone, but through resonance. You finally understand that your empathy is a gift, but only when offered to people who can receive it without draining you. And slowly, quietly, powerfully, the moment that once felt like destruction becomes the threshold of transformation, guiding you toward relationships where your heart is not a burden, but a match, and your depth is not a risk, but a home. Have you ever realized you were giving your heart to people who could never truly meet you halfway? If so, share your experience in the comments below so others can learn from your journey. And if you're just beginning to awaken to this truth, type, "I see it now." Let this be your moment of clarity and strength, the second deadly moment. Dissolution of self through accommodation. You arrive at the second deadly moment, the dissolution of self through accommodation, when you suddenly become aware that you have been shape-shifting for so long that your own inner voice has faded into the background. And every time you adjusted yourself to keep the peace, meet expectations, or carry emotional weight for others, another piece of your true identity sank beneath the surface until one day someone asks you, "What do you want?" And the question lands like a shock because the honest answer feels blurry, frightening, and painfully unclear. This moment almost destroys empaths because you built not one identity, but many, each one carefully molded to avoid conflict or disappointment. And while these personas helped you survive, they also pulled you further away from your center, burying your real preferences, burying your real needs, and burying the self that once felt natural. Then, when the exhaustion becomes unbearable, your instincts often push you toward a sudden rebellion, a dramatic swing to the opposite extreme, where you try to reclaim yourself by rejecting everything and everyone at once. But this opposite persona is just another mask, another overcorrection, another counterfeit version of you. Carl Jung's survival protocol interrupts this collapse with something steady, grounded, and deeply connected to spirituality and spiritual development. Active imagination for self-recovery. A practice where you stop shape-shifting long enough to ask yourself real questions and give space for the authentic answer to rise. You sit with yourself without trying to perform, impress, or say what sounds reasonable. Instead, you wait for the quiet voice beneath the noise of habit and obligation. You start small, asking what kind of morning rhythm feels natural, which people energize you, what pace your body prefers, what foods you actually enjoy, and you treat these answers as a rediscovery rather than a luxury. This process teaches you the essential skill that every empath must learn to survive. Letting people feel disappointed without rushing in to fix their discomfort. Disappointment is not danger. Disappointment is not a failure of kindness. Disappointment is simply proof that you are no longer abandoning yourself to keep the world smooth. From here, you rebuild your identity slowly, preference by preference, boundary by boundary, because the real self doesn't return in a single breakthrough moment. It returns through small choices that honor your values and match your energy. You speak to yourself as if guiding a friend. You are allowed to rest without reasons. You are allowed to say no without guilt. You are allowed to stop carrying what doesn't belong to you. And each sentence becomes a thread that pulls you back to center. Along the way, guilt will try to disguise itself as goodness, telling you that you are selfish for choosing yourself. But if you look closer, you will see that guilt appears only when you stop performing the role others benefited from, not when you do something wrong. That realization marks the beginning of inner healing, because now you respond not with rebellion, but with clarity, replacing overreactions with calm boundaries like, "I'm not available for that," and letting the sentence stand without explanation. When confusion arises, you anchor yourself to tiny, doable steps. 1. Honest no. This week, 1 conversation you exit when your body tightens. 1 evening you protect for quiet. And as you repeat these choices, your center grows stronger. You begin to recognize which roles require self-betrayal and slowly let them go. You learn to measure your progress by congruence instead of approval, noticing when your words, actions, and inner signals finally match. Through this slow, steady rebuilding, you transform the dissolution of self from a breaking point into a turning point, reclaiming the identity you lost through years of over-accommodation and stepping back into a life shaped not by expectation, but by truth. If this second deadly moment resonates with you, declare your strength in the comments below. Write, "I honor my true self, and I choose to stay whole." Your words may inspire another empath who needs this reminder today. The third deadly moment, the recognition of fundamental aloneness. The third deadly moment comes when you finally awaken to the haunting realization that no one will ever completely understand your inner world. No matter how close, loving, or intuitive another person may be, there will always remain an unbridgeable distance between your soul and theirs. For empaths, this truth strikes like lightning. It shatters the lifelong dream of perfect mutual understanding. You've likely built your relationships on the hope that someone could mirror your emotions, read your silences, and grasp your heart's language without you needing to explain. When you discover that such total connection is impossible, it can trigger a wave of existential despair so deep it threatens to pull you under. Many empaths respond by withdrawing, closing their hearts, and convincing themselves that it's safer not to feel at all. Carl Jung, whose spiritual wisdom continues to illuminate the depths of human experience, offered a path through this darkness. Accept the paradox. You are fundamentally alone, and yet meaningful connection is still possible. This isn't resignation, it's liberation. The moment you stop demanding perfect understanding from others, you begin to appreciate the beauty of partial understanding. You realize that love doesn't need to be flawless to be real. Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." With this truth, you see that your loneliness isn't a punishment. It's an invitation to deepen your relationship with yourself. From here begins the sacred art of self-companionship. Instead of craving constant validation, you start nurturing your own inner dialogue, learning to be good company to yourself. You speak to your heart gently, listen to your thoughts without judgment, and offer compassion where there was once self-criticism. This inner friendship becomes a source of stability that no external relationship can replace. As you fill your inner world with understanding and care, your outer connections begin to change. You no longer reach out from emptiness, but from fullness. You no longer demand that others rescue you from isolation. Instead, you meet them as equals, offering presence instead of need. In time, you see the miracle. Even though no one can completely know you, they can still meet you where it matters. A look, a word, a shared silence, these small bridges of connection become sacred. You stop measuring love by how perfectly it reflects you and begin to value how sincerely it touches you. And through this acceptance, your relationships deepen. You love without illusion. You listen without expectation. And you give without fear of being misunderstood. Jung taught that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. In embracing your aloneness, you discover that authenticity is the key to real connection. It's not about finding someone who fully understands you. It's about learning to live truthfully within yourself and bringing that truth to others. So when that crushing awareness comes that no one will ever fully know your soul, remember that it's not the end, but the beginning of real spiritual awakening. It's the moment your empathy matures into wisdom. It's the point where you stop looking for mirrors and start becoming light. And in that luminous self-acceptance, you finally understand what Carl Jung meant, that our task is not to escape solitude, but to find God, truth, and peace within it, and then share that peace, imperfectly but beautifully, with the world. If this moment spoke to your soul, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Tell us how you faced your own fundamental aloneness, and let's continue growing together on this journey of spiritual wisdom. 4. What happens when an empath survives all 3 moments? When an empath survives all 3 breaking points, the moment they stop rescuing people who refuse to rise, the moment they stop dissolving themselves to keep everyone else calm, and the moment they face the loneliness that comes after finally setting boundaries, they do not become colder, they become clearer. And this clarity is the foundation of spirituality and spiritual awakening. The inner shift where emotional overwhelm turns into emotional intelligence. Jung reminds us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And surviving these thresholds makes you conscious in a way you have never been before, shaping what he calls a tempered empathy that is soft but not porous, compassionate but not self-destructive, loving but never blind. This tempered empathy rests first on discernment, the ability to know who can truly reciprocate. You begin to sense the difference between someone who is hurting and someone who is harmful, between someone who needs support and someone who drains you because it is their pattern, not their moment. You start watching actions instead of promises, effort instead of excuses, repair instead of emotional theatrics. You learn that reciprocity is not about perfection, but about willingness. Do they show up? Do they try? Do they take responsibility? Discernment becomes the inner filter that protects your heart from becoming a free emotional service station for those who thrive on taking without returning. This is not coldness. It is stewardship, the wisdom of tending your emotional garden with a gate instead of leaving it open to anyone who wanders by. From that clarity grows authentic selfhood, the end of shapeshifting. You stop twisting yourself into whatever form keeps the peace. You stop swallowing your truth so others won't feel uncomfortable. You stop performing softness just to be acceptable. Instead, you reclaim your preferences, your boundaries, your voice. Your yes becomes intentional. Your no becomes clean, and your presence gains weight because you are no longer bending to match the room. People trust you more because you are solid. Your energy stops flickering between versions of yourself and begins to stabilize into who you actually are. The masks you wore to survive childhood finally fall away, and in their place rises a self that is honest, grounded, and not afraid to be seen. As your selfhood strengthens, you begin to form realistic connection, the ability to value imperfect but genuine communion. You stop chasing fantasy bonds and start appreciating relationships built on effort, repair, and mutual growth. You understand that intimacy is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of willingness. You choose the friend who shows up late but consistently over the person who dazzles you for a week, then disappears. You prefer the partner who learns out loud over the one who performs perfection. You stop expecting people to read your mind and begin practicing small, honest conversations that keep the connection real. You allow space for differences because you realize authentic bonds are not seamless. They are shaped, like pottery, through pressure, release, and return. Finally, surviving these thresholds leads you into self-companionship, the deepest relationship you will ever build, the one with yourself. You stop searching for constant external soothing and learn to become your own emotional anchor. You build rituals that steady your nervous system, create inner safety through routine, and learn to sit with your own discomfort without abandoning yourself. You begin hearing your intuition with new clarity, the tightening that signals a no, the warmth that signals a yes, the inner voice that becomes less like a whisper and more like guidance. When you nurture self-trust, you no longer negotiate for crumbs of validation. You offer yourself presence, rest, kindness, and truth. And with that inner bond, you stop fearing solitude because you are no longer alone inside yourself. Together, discernment, authentic selfhood, realistic connection, and self-companionship transform the empath's journey from constant emotional survival into grounded emotional mastery. They allow you to remain open without being unprotected, loving without being depleted, sensitive without being overwhelmed. They turn your empathy from something that once endangered you into something that empowers you, aligning your heart with truth, your energy with wisdom, and your path with a strength that can finally sustain you. In the end, these 3 breaking points aren't meant to destroy you. They're meant to reveal the strength, intuition, and deep inner knowing you were born with. As Carl Jung reminds us, the moments that threaten to shatter the empath are often the very ones that awaken their true power. If today's message from Spiritual Wisdom spoke to your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming videos filled with deeper insights and transformative wisdom.